Hello friends, and welcome to one of my favorite videos to date, How I Sourdough. I am going to be sharing all things sourdough with you guys, so hopefully this is just a place that you can go to if you want to start the sourdough journey, and I promise you will not regret it. So I'm going to be sharing how to feed it, how to make a starter, what to do with your discard, how to make artisan bread, what my favorite discard recipes are, how to do add-ins, how to store it, how to shape the bread, like literally all things sourdough. So I hope you guys are super excited. We're just going to jump right into it. There's a lot that's going to be in this video, so let's get started. The first thing is how I feed my sourdough, and this will actually start the night before. And so I've already done a whole round of feedings the night before. This is now the morning, but it's the same thing. So I do a ratio of 1 to 1 to 0.75. I swear by this ratio. I feel like it is the best to just double or even triple your sourdough starter within a couple hours. And so I do 100 grams of starter, 100 grams of flour, and 75 grams of water. Now, your starter, she gonna be thick, you guys, like real thick. And don't be alarmed, because when I first started, mine was not this thick and it kind of was a jump scare, but I'm telling you, it's going to work so well. And you guys will see that here in just a few clips, how it's tripled in about 4 hours. So set that lid on top, let it rise, and when it's doubled or tripled, we will get started. Now, if you're like, okay, hey, I don't even have a starter, don't worry, I got you. I filmed an entire series on TikTok of how to make a starter from scratch in 1 week with little to no discard, and it went so well. So I will leave those linked in my description box for you guys. I also wanted to quickly cover discard, because as you are doing your starter, you're going to have some discard left over. So whatever is left over from the 100 grams of starter that you are going to feed, you are going to put that into a jar and put it in the fridge. We are going to use that a little bit later. Based on the research I have done, discard is good for 1 to 2 weeks in the fridge. Correct me if I'm wrong, but my biggest tip is just to bake with it right as you are making your artisan bread. You're already baking, so you might as well just knock it all out. But you guys, look at how well this is doubling. This is just 4 hours after the feeding. It is filled the entire jar. I'm telling you, that ratio is everything. All right, moving on to actually making artisan bread. Now, I found my recipe from a few different sources, and I've kind of combined my best tips after making a few loaves and combined them all together. So I really feel like this is such an easy, simple way to make the yummiest bread. So for your artisan bread, you are going to need 355 grams of water. I also use room temp here. 50 grams of active bubbly starter. If you want to make sure it is active, you can do a float test, but if it's tripled or doubled in size within that few hours, I would say about 4 to 6 at the most, then you should be good to go. You're gonna use 9 grams of salt. I like pink Himalayan sea salt, and 500 grams of flour, and I am still using my unbleached all-purpose flour here. You are then going to let the bread rise for 1 hour. I like to put saran wrap over it and a towel, because when I just use a tea towel, it kind of gets like crusty on the top. But after the hour, you are gonna perform stretch and fold. So as you can see, I am literally taking the bread and pulling it as high as I can up and then down, and then switching and rotating until it doesn't really have much of a stretch anymore and all of it has been stretched. You are going to do this for the next 2 hours every 30 minutes. Now, sourdough is very forgiving, and sometimes I'm a little bit off, so don't be super stressed, but I like to get in 3 to 4 stretch and folds, usually 4 within that time. I will also leave all of these instructions in the description box of this video if you guys are one who wants like it all written out. But honestly, this part of making bread is so therapeutic to me. It literally feels like I am doing a sensory activity, which I do this with my kids, and it just makes you really get it, you know? So after those stretch and folds, you are going to leave your dough again on your counter for a few hours. So I usually don't switch it into my banneton until about 7 to 9 p.m. or so. So it's gonna rise quite a bit there. So while that is rising, sitting, doing whatever the technical term is, I'm gonna make some discard recipes with the sourdough discard that I have from the previous night and morning feeds. Now, if you know anything about me, you know I love me a good sweet. And this was actually kind of torture because I'm currently on 75 hard, and so I couldn't even enjoy these myself. But one of my favorite things to make with sourdough discard is cinnamon rolls. I found this recipe on Pinterest, so I will leave the link to it in the description box as well. I cannot take credit for it. I actually do a lot of recipes from this blog. I believe it's Little Spoon Farm, but if I'm butchering that, like I said, I'll have the correct link in the description box. But it is seriously so yummy. It is fluffy and like just tender, but it has like a crispy edge, and the frosting on top is so good. I actually make a double batch because you can never have too much frosting on a cinnamon roll, but you can have not enough frosting on a cinnamon roll, and that is just not good. These are something that I like to make on Sundays because I can have our family eat 2 to 3 of them. I have 2 little kids, they're 1 and 2, so they don't eat too much. And then I can give the rest of the batch away. So this usually makes about 8 to 10 rolls. I like to make mine pretty big, and so it's usually about 8. And so we can give them to a neighbor or to a friend. And I just feel like it's such a good way to give back to the people that you love. Everyone loves a nice, tasty treat. And these are seriously so delicious, you guys. I have also made this roll recipe with an orange filling and an orange frosting, and that is even better. I will leave that information in the description box for you guys as well. But as you can see here, the dough is a little sticky, so it took me a bit to roll this out, but just be patient. Again, enjoy the sensory activity, and soon you will have it all rolled out and ready for the cinnamon sugar layer. I also just wanted to chat a bit about hobbies, because I feel like hobbies in parenthood or adulthood are so needed, and it took me a long time to find some for myself. But I swear they just bring so much daily happiness. Like doing things like this is mindless to me. I mean, yeah, I'm following a recipe of some sort, but I get to just kind of not think about anything else. Use my hands, which I really feel like is something that is also very helpful for my brain and my happiness level, but just do something that I love. And I just highly recommend, if you guys are struggling in that area, to just find a hobby. It doesn't have to be sourdough, it doesn't have to be baking, but I imagine you are a mom if you're watching this video, or you're at least a woman. And so find something that you love and that just makes you feel happy and feel like you get to do something that fills up your cup. I'm sorry if your mouth is watering, because mine sure is, but I like to make these and then also make the icing, which I can share in a second. But I put them in the fridge and I end up baking them the next morning, so I'm not doing too much baking in one day. But I'm also showing you guys how big of a mess just baking in general makes. And this is something that I observed from my mom. I never once heard her tell me to do this, but as she cooked in the kitchen, she always cleaned as she went. And now looking back, I'm just like, dang, that woman just always moved. But it is so helpful, and it makes it so much less overwhelming to just kind of clean as you go. A lot of times you're gonna need the same like kitchen gadgets anyway, so you kind of have to. But I like to take a pause just kind of in the midst of all the chaos, clean up my space, start fresh, and then continue working on everything. So there's the icing. Like I said, we're gonna store that in the fridge as well. And then these will be ready to go in the morning. All I'll have to do is just preheat the oven, throw them in, and everything will be ready. So now we're moving on to a savory discard recipe that I love, and that is pizza sourdough, which honestly is one of the easiest things that you can make with your discard. If you're feeling kind of overwhelmed with all of the recipes and all of the baking, I think this is a great way to start. You quite literally just throw all of the ingredients into a bowl. If you have a KitchenAid, it makes it even easier, but if not, you can mix with hands or some sort of tool. And then you put it into a bowl and let it rise for 8 hours, and then it is good to go, which is so amazing. I also will leave this in the fridge. I believe it's good in the fridge for 2 to 3 days. And then you could also put it in your freezer. And I believe it's good for a couple months, but don't quote me on that. I also included this because I thought it was so cute. My kids have their own little KitchenAid that they play with, and Echo and grabbed it, and she wanted Nathaniel to come like sit next to her and play and just do what Mama was doing. I thought that was so fun. But I'm showing here on my highlights on Instagram, I have some other sourdough recipes that I have saved, because if I did all of them for you guys, it would have taken me forever to film, and we would have been here forever as well. So I also love sourdough brownies, sourdough pretzels, and I want to try out crackers, muffins, biscuits, bagels, all the yummy things. My sweet Rocky boy finally joined us for this video. This was right after his nap, and he always loves some good cuddles, but I had him help me with this portion of the baking. We needed to chop up everything that I'm gonna put into my artisan bread as far as add-ins go. I am obsessed with a jalapeno cheddar loaf. Honestly, I make it more than a regular loaf because it is that good. I use extra sharp white cheddar cheese and I cube it. And then I just finally chop up jalapenos. This was for 2 loaves, so I used an entire block of cheese and 2 jalapenos. But if I was just doing 1 loaf, I would just do half a block of cheese and 1 jalapeno. I've also tried garlic parmesan bread, and that is really good, especially for like pasta nights. My goodness. I also would love to try like a cinnamon sugar and a chocolate one, but once I do that, I will share with you guys. And if you guys have good recipes for that, let me know. But we are jumping forward a bit. This is a little bit later in the night, but this is me storing my sourdough starter. So because I don't want to feed it every single day, I will store it in the fridge, and I store 100 grams at a time because that is what I use for the feeding. I try to make my life as easy as possible, although you can see me struggling here with one hand because Echo wanted up. But 100 grams is what I do, and this can last 1 week in the fridge until I need to feed it again. I like to label mine the date so that I know because I can easily forget, but as you can see, the left is discard and the 2 rights were my starters because I had grown one from scratch and then I had one from my friend as well. Again, kind of jumping around, but I've tried to organize this video as best as I can, but there's just some steps that kind of overlap. This is my sourdough discard pizza dough. And as you guys could see, that baby exploded. I don't even think that was the full 8 hours. I think I did like 6 or 7. Honestly, I'm such a kind of like wing it baker cooker, but she did so good. And so I kind of had to like reshape her to put her in the bag because getting it out of the bowl was super hard. But like I said, this can stay in the fridge for 2 to 3 days, and then you can also freeze it. This makes many pizzas. I could probably make 4 pizzas out of this and feed a couple families. So I love that recipe. It is now about 8 p.m. in this video, and so this is after my dough has sat for a few hours after those stretch and folds. And so this is where you will put it in a floured banneton and then put it in the fridge to proof overnight. And so for me, this is where I have found it to be the easiest to do add-ins. So I'll scrape my dough outside of the bowl and then I kind of stretch it to be flat in like a big rectangle shape. And then this is where I will add in whatever I want to make the bread. Like I said, for this one, I am doing cheddar jalapeno. So I'll just kind of sprinkle those all throughout the bread, make it evenly coated, evenly spread, so that when I go to roll it up, it's all kind of like evenly dispersed. And then when you shape the bread, it's a little bit easier because everything is just in there. Sometimes a lot of the cheese or jalapeno will kind of start to like poke out when I start to shape it, which is totally fine. I like it being on the outside too. But it can make it hard to shape because it'll just kind of make it sticky. But as you can see kind of throughout the bread in this entire thing, there's a lot of bubbles, and that is such a good sign. So once you've got it all rolled up like this and stretched out, now you can begin shaping, and I kind of do this like fluid motion of like pulling it towards me. And as I do that, it starts to make even more air bubbles on the top. This is my favorite part of making sourdough bread. I don't know what it is, but it is so therapeutic. It is my absolute fave. And as you guys could see, some jalapenos were poking out, but flip it around, throw it onto the banneton, and then kind of pinch the sides together. If there's any parts that are falling apart, throw that saran wrap and tea towel back over, and you can put this in the fridge for overnight. I usually bake about 12 to 15 hours after this, somewhere around there. I believe it can sit and proof for up to 36 hours. It is clearly the next day, and this clip just makes me laugh because as you guys saw, I dropped the top of the Dutch oven and it was very loud, and Rocky was like, "What happened?" And I was like, "I dropped my Dutch oven." And he's like, "Mama, you're supposed to catch it." I'm like, "Yeah." So what you guys just saw me do was preheat the oven to 450 degrees, and I put my Dutch oven with the lid inside of it. It's gonna preheat with the oven, and I don't know why that's a thing, but it is. And then we are now going to flip the bread out of the banneton onto parchment paper, and we are going to score it. I do believe there's like not a lot of like actual reasoning behind scoring besides this is how they like marked their bread back in the day. But scoring is also super fun. I showed you guys my blade because for a couple months, I didn't have a blade on my score. I just had like the scoring tool without a blade. Had no clue that I was missing it, and scoring was so hard for me. But also you don't want to reuse the same blade, so I'll use different sides each time and then toss it and get a new blade. So throw it into the Dutch oven, put it in for 20 minutes at 450 degrees, and then you're gonna take the lid off and do another 15 minutes. This could vary a little bit depending on your oven, but for me, that is the golden amount of time. And as you can see, I literally have my mouth water every single time I see this bread and smell it. It makes my whole entire kitchen smell so dang good. There you have it, you guys. Artisan bread, not artesian bread. You're gonna want to let this cool entirely before you cut into it. And as you cut in, it should have like an even amount of air bubbles. I used to have like really big air bubbles, and I don't know all the science behind it, but I feel like the stretch and folds I've been incorporating have helped. But if you guys want to store this long term, I would cut it up into slices like this and you can freeze it. But for us, it typically lasts about a week on the counter and we usually eat it by then, but if not, it will start to mold. I do think putting it in the fridge might help a little bit, but that is how I sourdough, you guys. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video and feel like you can take on sourdough. It has seriously brought me so much joy, and I hope that it will do the same for you guys. But if you ever have any questions, my DMs on Instagram are always open at Kylene Ryall. I'd be happy to help you. But happy sourdough baking. I hope you guys love it as much as I do.